Hello, my name is Donald Peck. I'm the pastor at the United Methodist Church in Loami, Illinois. I prepare these videos for all of you who wish to have some Bible lesson for your in-home worship and for your personal edification. The lesson today comes from Job, chapter 23, verses 1 through 9, and 1 through 16 through 17. It reads like this, and I'm reading from a version of a translation called The Message. It's a little easier to understand than the New International Version, which is what I usually use. So this is Job's comments to his friends who have been comforting him. It reads like this: I'm not letting up. I'm standing my ground. My complaint is legitimate. God has no right to treat me like this. It isn't fair. If I knew where on earth to find him, I'd go straight to him and I would lay my case before him face to face. I would give all my arguments firsthand, and I would find out exactly what he's thinking. I would discover what's going on in his head. Do you think he'd dismiss me or bully me? No. He'd take me seriously. He'd see a straight living man standing before him. My judge would acquit me for good of all charges. Now I travel east looking for him, and I find no one. Then west, but not a trace. I go north, but he's hidden his tracks. Then south, and not even a glimpse. But he knows where I am and what I've done. He can cross-examine me all he wants, and I'll pass the test with honors. I've followed him closely, my feet in his footprints, not once swerving from his way. I've obeyed every word he's spoken. And not just obeyed his advice, I've treasured it. But he is singular and sovereign, and who can argue with him? He does what he wants and when he wants to, and he'll complete in detail what he's decided to do about me. And whatever else he determines to do, is it any wonder that I dread meeting him? Whenever I think about it, I get scared all over again. My God makes my heart sink. God Almighty gives me the shudders. I'm completely in the dark. I can't see my hand in front of my face. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now, one of the things we need to establish is, who are the friends? Well, I looked at Haley's Bible Handbook, and this is a good one for you. I recommend you go out and buy it to have on your shelf. Haley's Bible Handbook. Okay. And this book tells us that these three friends who came to comfort Job in his suffering for 7 days and nights, they do fine. They simply sat with Job. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. This is found in chapter 2, verse 13. These guys are, I don't know if I can say these words correctly, Eliphaz the Temanite, who was a descendant of Esau, and Edomite. Okay, you get that? Bildad the Shuhite, and was a descendant of Abraham, and Keturah. And then there was Zophar the Naamathite, who was of unknown origin or locality. Now, all three of these guys were probably nomad princes. And then there was a fourth friend who does not enter into the picture until after the three have quit. And this is Elihu, the Buzite. And he shows up in Job chapter 32. He is a descendant of Abraham's brother Nahor. Now, that's who they are. One of the things about this scene is that we can learn from their example. If you have a friend who is in grief and suffering, you need not say anything. Just go sit with them. Keep your mouth shut and just sit. The trouble is, they all started talking. And that's usually what happens. We're so nervous when we're around people who are suffering. We think we have to talk. And it's not so. Just go be with them, sit with them. You don't have to say a word. You don't have to pray. You don't have to read scriptures. Just sit with them. And if the situation allows it, you may touch them. Shake their hand, give them a hug or whatever. Three friends, they all started talking. And in their talking, they tried to explain that there has to be, they say, a connection between Job's present suffering and his past life. They're looking for a logical cause and effect relationships, which in the spiritual world and in the emotional world and in the mental health world, that is not always the case. Now, their arguments can be reduced to 3 points. Number one, Job was suffering. Number two, God is just and would not allow a person to suffer without reason. And then number three, therefore, Job must have done something bad to deserve this suffering. Oddly enough, I meet people every once in a while who in their conversations about their situation in life, this is what they believe. This kind of thought, well, personally, I believe that this kind of thought is a tool of the devil who is trying to discourage us even more and frustrate God's plan for us and destroy our mind, our mental health, destroy our emotional health, and destroy our spiritual health by convincing us that we are such bad sinners God would reject us and not have anything to do with us. Well, what we need to do is stand up and look at the devil or whoever it is that's saying these things and speak as Job spoke in chapter 23. Now, lessons. The Old Testament premise was that the sins of the fathers will be visited upon the sons. And this was a transference of judgment and became an excuse for bad behavior. The source of it was a statement that in Genesis where God told the people that this is, and in their sin and the things that they had done are so bad that their future generations are going to be, they're going to suffer for this. Well, Ezekiel stopped this thinking. He renounced this thinking, and you can see it in Ezekiel chapter 18. And I quote, God's message to me, what do you people mean by going around the country repeating the saying, the parents ate green apples, the children got the stomach ache? As sure as I'm the living God, you're not going to repeat this saying in Israel any longer. Every soul, man, woman, and child belongs to me, parent and child alike, and you die for your own sin, not another's. Well, instinctively, Job knew this, and he renounced the words of his comforters, just as you should renounce any effort to make you feel this way. You also should take this to heart. If you're suffering at this point in time in your life, you do not suffer because you did something wrong. It is the realm in which we live, a realm of suffering, and it's not your fault. Oh, one other thing. Notice the absence of grudges or hate. It's just not there in the conversations and in the words of Job. Job knew that when you feed grudges, our love slowly dies. And when we make peace with ourselves and with those who have offended us, then we can deal with the other as we would like to be treated. Then we will have the initiative to love, to give, to offer, to serve, to care for, and not just have the need to win, to be served, or to take advantage of and exploit the other. We all need to stop and pray and ask for the antidote in life called forgiveness, which is what we see in the character of Job. Build that part of your character, the ability to forgive and the resistance to feeding grudges. Because when you feed grudges, your love dies. Now, where is God? I laugh because I'm remembering an HBO produced series called The American Gods. It was kind of what do you call it? A make fun of type movie of the culture of our time, and what it is that we have determined is our God. And in most of our cases, our gods become something other than Yahweh, the one who created us. And I remember one episode where God took a road trip across America just to get away from everything. And that thought alone amuses me. And everybody was frantic and asked the same question Job was asking: where in the world is God? Where in the world is God? So, in verse 10, Job concludes, well, I can't find God, but, and here it is, He knows where I am and what I've done. Remember this: your inability to see God does not mean He has gone on a road trip, as in the HBO produced series. He's not on a road trip. He's not distracted from your situation. He actually feels for you, and He's aware of your suffering. And you say, why would you say this? Well, because He became flesh, and He suffered as we now suffer, and He died our death so that we may have the hope of life after this world. So you may not be able to see Him, but He shares in your suffering, and He knows where you are. This is the conclusion that came to Job, and I hope it does for you. Now, in the NIV translation, verse 10 of our lesson has a statement: when He has tested me, I will come forth as gold. Well, in this suffering, as in most suffering, we see an absence of intervention, and that's what it is. God has the ability to intervene, and there are some instances in life where I have witnessed the intervention of God in the suffering of some of my acquaintances. But for the most part, that does not happen. and suffering continues. And when the suffering has ended, we see in most cases some growth of character. Now, the reference to gold is a commentary on the process of refinement. The gold ore is harvested from the mountain, it's put in a vessel, and the vessel is inserted into a very hot fire, which melts the ore. Now, it's not gold until the ore is liquefied and boiled, and the impurities float to the surface to be skimmed or separated and then discarded. Now, modern day jewelers use a term called tinker's dam. This was a vessel that had a little gate, so to speak, which, when at the proper time, is broken to allow the top layer of the gold or of the vessel to allow the top layer of the gold to flow over the edge of the vessel, carrying away the unusable, leaving in the vessel the pure gold. Well, this is a common Old Testament and New Testament, because the Apostle Paul refers to the same process. The one thing that this life can do for us is make us better people if we'll let it. To refine that which is unusable and that which is unsavory out of the character of our lives. Then, well, in conclusion, I relate to the statement, "Oh, that I know where I might find him." I know there's times in many of our lives where we think, if only we could gain access to God, the problem of his vindication would be solved. Job believes this. If I can just have an audience with God and tell him that I don't deserve this punishment, I don't deserve this suffering. Job believes God would not be violent with him, but would listen to his protestations of innocence and would acquit him. But God is inaccessible. He is neither forward nor backward, neither on the left hand nor on the right hand. And yet, if Job cannot find God, he knows that God can find him. For he said in verse 10, "He knows the way that I take." And then that if God chooses to put him to the test, then he knows that his character will come forth as gold, vindicated as innocent. We see this in verses 10 through 11. And at some point, every person can identify with God, with Job. All of us have had this experience, an experience much like Job. And at times we can't seem to locate God, no matter how hard we look. I see this mostly in families who are grieving the loss of their loved one. And they can't see past the grief. They can't see past the pain of their heart. They can't see past the absence of their loved one. Well, here's a word of encouragement. Though we may not be able to sense the presence of God, that does not mean he is not right here with us. Though we may not be able to see him with darkness all around. Job says, "I can't see my hand in front of my face. It is so dark." But be assured that God is not distance. God is not distant. Sometimes he hides himself, but he does not make himself absent. I hope this helps. God bless you in your day-to-day activity.